morning. Happy Friday to everybody. Casual Friday is what I'm calling this. Nice and casual Friday. So we're just going to hang out for just a little bit. I've got a lot of things kind of circling in my mind right now. I actually woke up and started reading through some of these articles, and I came across something that's been talked about. There's a housing bill coming up. It's called the 21st Century Act Advances in House Committee Markup. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that, what that looks like, and how that correlates and what we need to be kind of paying attention to. But there's also a few other articles. I was thinking about making Fridays more of a time where I come in and kind of recap what we kind of talked about this week on the stream, and then bring in some other conversations, maybe main articles that might be happening in the news. But today I'm gonna do that at the end. I do have a few things I want to kind of go through, talk about some articles that I kind of read, do some reviews of them, talk through those, and then I probably will do a recap, because the whole point of what I'm trying to do here is create a time where we can digest a lot of these articles, break them down, figure out what's actually going on in the real estate industry, and then kind of go from there and try to take what we hear and apply it into our businesses and figure out exactly how we can take what we're hearing and apply it and then use it and then have it and see the opportunities that are in it. So with all that being said, so today, the few of the articles I'm going to talk about is that bill. I am going to be talking, there's been a couple little articles pop up in regards to the Compass deal, the Compass buying anywhere, and some of the concerns that are going into the federal government in regards to that. So that's being talked about. So I'm going to kind of hash that out just a little bit. And then I am going to provide just some action items as far as like, what is, like, how do you win listings? Like, what does that long game look like? We talked about it yesterday a little bit in the stream about, how do we take and secure our listings where they're actually sellable? So today I got an article here we're going to talk about. It's basically titled "Winning the Listings Long Game." So we'll go over that one, and then I'm going to touch on just a light note here, and it's an article by The Spruce. Never heard of them, but it says, "The Spruce, make your best home." And it says, we asked real estate pros for the best upgrades that add major value, and they chose these 4. So I figure let's keep our finger on the pulse about what's trending and what's going on as far as like remodels and stuff that can happen in homes. I think a lot of people come the first of the year, they might begin to do some of these type of remodels, getting their home ready to go on the market in the spring. So might be a good conversations for you guys to have some information to go from. So with all that being said, thank you for being here. If it's your first time here, let me just explain briefly what I do. I go through some news articles. I digest kind of what it is. We talk through those. I pull out action items out of those articles as far as being able to see what the opportunity is. And at the same time, I also scrutinize the articles to see what the truth and where the truth kind of lies, realizing that headlines sometimes clutter the landscape because they need to sell ads, they need to get clicks and that kind of stuff. So sometimes articles can be written in that way. Not all, but sometimes it can be written that way. So we want to be able to discern what the truth is and then take that and then apply it into our businesses and also be the orators of the truth with our clients. So that's what this is about. So that is the main goal here. So this technically is kind of like your daily edge in an ever-changing market, right? As a real estate agent. So that's the point. So let's go ahead and jump straight into this very first article. And this one right here is titled, "Federal Scrutiny of Compass Deal Highlights Growing Concern Over Real Estate Market Power." Market power. This is by propmoto.com. All right. The way it begins here, this is by Franco Ferrado, editor of PropMoto. It begins by saying a group of bipartisan U.S. senators sent a letter to federal regulators saying a proposed deal that would expand Compass's brokerage services under a model called Compass Anywhere could hurt competition and ultimately raise costs of home buyers and sellers. They argue that the deal might allow a large brokerage to leverage its data and market footprint in ways that could squeeze smaller competitors and reduce consumer choice. The senators urged regulators to take a hard look at competition and transparency issues before approving the transaction. Let me step back for just a second, set the stage about what this is going on. You might not have heard this, but I would say you probably heard a little bit about this. So Compass is a very large brokerage that has been on kind of a buying frenzy, if you will, for many years, buying up independents, buying up some franchises over in California and throughout the states. and basically gathering agents into the brokerage by acquisitions. That has been their main thing: is stock acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions. That is their game. They don't go in and do startups. They typically go in and acquire. So Compass has grown. It's been growing for many, many years. It's become quite a powerhouse. We've talked about this on the stream a little bit about the Compass and Zillow fight as far as private listings and what those look like. So there's a little bit of a push with Compass pushing against Zillow, allowing private property listings. So setting the stage a little bit, Compass can leverage that by having more and more agents inside of Compass, which would be a larger control of the amount of data under one roof. So the beginning of this article's got some truth to it. There is an element of power in there as far as the data is concerned. But at the same time, we got to also take a step back and say, oh, and just to set the stage as well, is Anywhere is a parent company to a lot of the well-known franchises. So this is talking about Compass acquiring Anywhere, and Anywhere owns the franchises Century 21, Coldwell Banker, ERA, Sotheby's, and a few other ones, right? So they hold those other franchises underneath the Anywhere network. So Compass has made a bid to actually acquire and buy. They have agreed terms. We're waiting through basically the government to give the approval, so there's no monopoly going on. So that's what this article is kind of addressing. There's some concerns popping up about this. But here's the part where I would say, like, there's obviously always an argument to be had on either sides. But when we start talking about control of data, you then have to say, well, you can't necessarily control people and what they do. You might at the time have a lot of the data. But in our industry, every single agent's an individual contractor for the most part. There's a few exceptions out there, like Redfin. They have more of a salary-based agent base, whereas the majority of franchises are all 1099 individual contractors, run their own companies, and can leave at any point. So yes, on the surface, you would say they could gain a lot of data, but at any point, people could leave, be unhappy, and all that. And then on top of that, you have Anywhere that has all these other franchises that operate independently. There's a few oversights, but still operate independently and have a lot of autonomy inside of that brokerage. So in some ways, it's more of a stock acquisition, financial security play. And obviously, yes, there's an argument to be had that there is some data at play. But we do need to take a step back and realize that the data part of the equation is already at play. When you start talking about other companies that have access to that data that can control the market, you don't have to go any farther than just mentioning Zillow. Zillow is a company that aggregates every single type of MLS listing out there, and they have an overwhelming amount of power, not only in what the consumer sees and how they get the information, but also how agents do their business, and then agents typically fund Zillow for what they get. So when you start talking about power and control, you have to be aware of those things. Like, yes, there's always going to be this play going on, but in reality, you can't control what people do. So people can switch at any point. All right, there, the stage is set. All right, so that goes on to say the concern centers on scale and data. Compass has grown rapidly in recent years and already commands a significant share of listings and agent relationships in many markets. Under the Anywhere model, the argument goes, Compass could use proprietary data gathered across its platforms to underprice competitors, optimize lead flows to favored agents, and limit access to information that independent brokerages rely on to compete. Critics say that would weaken competitive pressure on commission rates and home pricing services, leaving buyers and sellers with fewer choices and potentially higher transaction costs. Again, that's making an assumption that Compass can control every aspect of the real estate industry that they have underneath their belt. That's historically not been true. Their commissions, all those type of things have always been negotiable. They will continually be negotiable by real estate agents. That's what happens. And if a company puts too much pressure on an agent, guess what? They could leave that brokerage and go somewhere that allows them to do what they need to do for their businesses. So there's actually more of a give and take inside of brokerage models. Whereas when you start comparing like what Zillow's doing, it's their way or no way, right? It's if I want to do a private listing and like right now, and they penalize me for doing so, they won't let me market my property. So if we're talking about like control, well, you got to look broader than that, right? So it does sound like where I'm more of in a favor of this. And to be honest, this is not really new in our industry. This has been going on for a very long time. Matter of fact, Anywhere was originally Realogy, and there's been other companies before that have bought and owned these franchises. So this is not new. But I understand wanting to investigate a little bit. That's fine. Heightened regulatory scrutiny of brokerage consolidation reflects deeper unease about the concentration of market power and the role of data in real estate transactions. If regulators respond by tightening approval conditions or even blocking the deal, it could slow similar large-scale brokerage interactions. Furthermore, the emphasis on consumer harm and choice could push brokerages to rethink how they share data and maintain their competitive access. So there's a lot going on here. This is something I'm just kind of watching. This is something just keep our tabs on because we don't really know yet. Right now, the deal's done. So will the government intervene and make the position that there is a anti-competitive nature to this? Is there a monopoly going on? That's where we're kind of at. So this is happening. This is what's being talked. And now the politicians are beginning to think through this, and they're making the pull to push this in to be reviewed. To be honest, Compass and Anywhere expected this to happen. They said that in their actual statement. They said that this is pending review, right? So they know this was going to happen. This is not breaking news by any means, but you got to understand that Compass is in the process of acquiring, because there are things going on in our industry that require some pushback. Zillow and what they do, and that honestly could cause some harm to the consumer as well. So it's a balancing act. So that's what we're seeing. Now, another article here that actually talks about this as well that I'll go straight into is by Inman. Again, I'm a fan here. Again, not an affiliate of them whatsoever. Just they do a good job of writing articles and providing sources. So this is the title of this one says, Democrats raise antitrust concerns over Compass Anywhere merger. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Ron Wyden asked the DOJ and FTC to thoroughly investigate the pending deal, which they say would entrench existing antitrust and price manipulation concerns. To be honest, that's an extreme kind of position because, again, you've got to make the assumption that Compass is like every other company out there, that agents are employees at that point, and Compass has the ultimate control of what those agents do, right? So what they're failing to realize here in this is that we have autonomy. We are agents. We all run our own businesses technically, as far as individual contractors are concerned. If there's too much pressure on the way we want to do business from some corporate company like Compass or Anywhere, then we have the ability to pack our bags and then move. So they're making an assumption that because that Compass is acquiring data, that then means what we're going to do as far as antitrust and pricing goes along with that. And that's pretty far leap. That's a pretty far leap, in my opinion. That would be my opinion, but that's not my experience in 20 years in real estate. You are dealing with some of the most independent, hardworking people that scrutinize their business. And trust me when I say that they're going to scrutinize this if they have too much pressure coming in from like a corporate entity. They would bail fast. So there's a balancing act even internally inside of brokerages that this statement doesn't really address. It says two prominent Democrats have some serious bones to pick with the proposed $1.6 billion merger of real estate brokerage giants Compass and Anywhere, claiming the deal threatens to stifle consumer choice and fair industry competition. Democratic Senators Elizabeth Warren and Ron Wyden are asking federal antitrust regulators to thoroughly investigate the pending deal, which they claim would entrench existing antitrust and price manipulation concerns that have been at the center of mounting litigation. Look, I have no problem with government coming in and scrutinize certain big acquisitions like this that does have a large percentage of an industry being consolidated under one roof. I think that's fine, right? Investigate away. As long as you're unbiased in your investigation, no problem. I have no problem with that. Seek the truth, make sure it's all above board, and then back off. But government oversight where they come in and scrutinize, companies doing what they've always done, I think that could be a very slippery slope. So as long as it's fair and balanced, no problem. But if they start injecting their own opinions and kind of what their thoughts are, not based on the truth, that's where I'm going to be paying attention. That's where I'm going to be pushing back just a little bit to say what is actually going on here, because you have to make the argument that Compass controls everything that happens underneath that brand. And that, to be honest, is not how it's going to go down, especially if you're part of the Anywhere company. You already know how that structure works. And the same thing that this has happened before, multiple times. This is not the first time that the Anywhere network has been bought out by other people. So Antitrust regulators declined to intervene when Democrats raised similar concerns about mortgage lending giant Rocket Company's acquisitions of Redfin and Mr. Cooper this year. So, and this is a good point. So, what they're saying here is when there was a merger going on, and this just happened, is that the lending giant Rocket Company, so that's like Rocket Mortgage, they acquired Redfin and Mr. Cooper loans, which Mr. Cooper held a massive amount of the mortgages that were out there and on loan. So they bought up billions of dollars worth of mortgage loans and company assets. And antitrust regulators didn't step in on this acquisition. And that's a fascinating one, right? Because when you start talking about ultimate control, well, they are employees. They are certain mandates that each one of those companies that they bought out can mandate how their employees operate and what they do and how they do it. So they acquired a huge percentage. But again, I'm not being hard on them. I'm not going to sit there and say that they're a monopoly or there's not fair out there, right? I would almost say, like, just because that happened, it does not negate all the independents out there and what they do, because sometimes that's a better service anyway. So, and that's this whole argument comes back to that. Is the argument is not that these companies can do these things. It's like, to say that they're going to squander every independent and every other type of brokerage out there that's not a part of them. That's a pretty strong leap, because we're a relational type business. They failed to realize that this is not a sales position. This is a relational one. And the brands help, strengthen an agent. They give them support and systems and tools and resources and training and many things, and often a very strong brand. But at the same time, the piece that goes along with that you can't negate is that relationship factor that the agent has with the consumer. And ultimately, that agent can channel into all those services and provide those services back, and then deliver that relational type service and ultimately elevate their value proposition. And they can do that with Compass or without Compass, with Anywhere or without Anywhere, right? It all depends on how they want to work. Now, there's different benefits to being a part of a franchise, I would argue. But still, the point is like, you have to make the argument that they do this, and therefore the value proposition by every other company is non-existent. And I think that's a very, very harsh leap to make, especially if you're not going to scrutinize that company that actually does control all their assets and does control their employees, right? Now we're not even comparing apples to apples. A spokesperson from Compass Real Estate said the company has nothing new to share on the deal. And it, quote, "All we have to say immediately about the deal is in the news release announcing the combination." Compass's spokesperson, Devin Daly, said in an email. Daly also provided a link to the brokerage's position on homeowner choice, which that's arguing the whole point about the homeowner having the right to keep their home off the market for a certain amount of days before it has to be marketed and syndicated to all the main portals out there. This defends the company's stance on private listings. All right. In a December 16th letter to antitrust regulators at the Department of Justice and Federal Trade Commission, Warren and Waden said, large brokerages such as Compass and Anywhere have grown by acquiring or absorbing smaller regional firms, end quote. The top 10% of brokerages already control 42% of U.S. sales volume, Warren and Waden claimed, citing data compiled by T360. Quote, "Because brokerages control access to listings and market data, consolidation in this sector can directly affect what homes consumers see, how much they pay, and who can participate in the market. The proposed merger would amplify those risks by consolidating enormous market power into a single entity," end quote. That's, again, there's a lot of assumptions inside of that statement that doesn't necessarily correlate to the way our industry actually works. There's a little bit of a disconnect here. This is not a partisan. I don't care about politics. What I am saying, though, is there's an assumption inside of here that's being made, is that we are, by agents, we are going to limit what consumers can see. And what we're really, that argument is only in regards to the private listing conversation. In that private listing conversation, we're talking about at most 3 days off the market before it hits and goes everywhere. We're not talking about inevitably removing something and never syndicating it out. No one's even trying to do that. And no one would even say that that is the goal in this. Compass has never even said that's the goal. That's not even what the whole argument is for. The argument is just saying, look, some homeowners are not ready to put their home all the way out there because of certain situations, and they deserve the right to do so. Now, Compass and Anywhere and every other real estate agent out there wants to get their property seen. We're selling properties. So to say we would not do that is an assumption that, again, Compass has some ultimate control on what agents do and how they do it. And that is not our industry. That is not our industry. So a broker internally could make a decision like that. They could say something where our agents have to do a 3-day, private listing before they can go live with it. But then guess what? If the brokerage makes that and the agent doesn't like that model, guess what they do? They leave. They go somewhere else. They don't like the policy, they leave. So again, you can't control the agent. You cannot control the agent. So there's an assumption being made that that's what's going to happen. Agents want to sell property because they make money only by selling. If they can't sell property because they can't market the property, they're not going to stay at that brokerage, period. That's how it works. If the merger is allowed to proceed, the Democratic lawmakers claimed it would increase market concentration, possibly in violation of federal antitrust laws, leading to anti-competitive harm. That would have to be seen. And then the argument comes this way. Quote, the merger would place enormous pressure on mom and pop and independent brokerages, which play a vital role in serving local communities and offering lower cost, consumer-friendly alternatives, end quote, Warren and Waden claimed. Quote, as consolidation reshapes the industry, smaller independent firms face an impossible choice: be absorbed into national networks or shut their doors, not because of inefficiency, but because they cannot compete against the branding, technology capacity, and network effects of mega brokerages, end quote. Look, this is, I get it, and the argument is probably very valid, right? We are moving into an area where technology, AI, and all these type of integrations are happening at such a rampant pace that we can't keep up. I get the argument. But to then take it to the next step to say that all mom and pops and everything else and this consolidation is not going to lead to choice in the homeowners, and then you get into the antitrust argument and all that kind of stuff. Again, you're negating, you're failing to realize how important the value of the actual real estate agent is to the consumer. You're negating the value that the agent brings to the equation. You are simply making a statement that only technology, only AI, and only these brands matter. And you negate the whole crucial middle piece that actually makes the whole thing work. And that's the real estate agent. The agent is what makes this work. It's what provides the value. All those arguments are logistical arguments. These are logisticals that help you maneuver in different things. And it's also a disconnect from what we see in typical rural America, where everybody knows everybody. And most of the time, consumers know multiple real estate agents, and those that deliver the best package and the best value and can articulate that the best wins the deal. And yeah, this kind of stuff helps them to move faster, but it doesn't negate that real estate agent. So again, that is my thought process here. Now, they'll investigate it. They might not investigate it. We'll see what happens. They're pushing them to do so. So we'll see kind of where this lands. So let me just step back a little bit and now just kind of talk to you more directly as far as an agent goes. And when we hear news like this, and again, we could hear this and immediately go down the direction of like, oh no, I'm an independent, or I'm not part of this big brand and I'm now irrelevant. And that becomes a talk track. And in reality, I would hone more into, and this is for every agent out there, hone into your value proposition. The brokerage you align with gives you support, resources, tools, and systems, and staff, and broker support, and all those type of things. But then you as an agent have value, and you need to focus on what that is. You need to think about what is your exclusive, unique value proposition that you offer. What is your strategy in getting in front of consumers in spite of all this noise? We still need to pay attention. We still need to be aware of what's going on. But we cannot rest here and say, yeah, I'm irrelevant because all these type of things are happening. All this maneuvering is going on. Newsflash, guys, it's been going on since the beginning of real estate, right? It's nothing new. This is nothing new. Shifting of power, shifting of ownership. This is all new. Ultimately, a lot of this stuff won't even affect any of us noticeably. All right. Very good. All right, let's jump into, to be honest, probably more of a boring conversation. But one that I think we just need to be aware of about what's being talked about across the board, right? I just noticed, I think I might be peaking on my mic. Sorry guys if I am. I'm gonna bring that down just a little bit. So here is the article, or the bill, if you will, that it's being circulated right now. And I'm gonna go to nar.realtor first and read just a brief synopsis of what this is. I'll show you a headline of the bill, and I'm just going to pull out some key points that I've read through this thing and kind of pulled out that I think really more correlate. Now, there's a lot in this. I encourage you guys to get on here, read the bill, go through it. It's a lot of pages. I mean, I think it's like 1,000 pages. Typical, like, bills that you see passed by the government it's got a lot in there. But there's a few things that are very good in our industry. So here's the thing: Bipartisan Housing for the 21st Century Act advances in-house committee markup. All right, so it says NAR strongly supports the bill. So first note is the National Association of Realtors strongly does support this bill, and it focuses on modernizing outdated housing programs, reducing regulatory barriers, and increasing flexibility for local communities. So that's what I've kind of read through this, skimmed through this, and I'd say that's exactly what they're trying to do here. There's a lot of stuff in there that's been that way for a very, very long time, and it's not been revisited. So what they've done is a lot of the same packages and programs that we've already had, they went back through and began to look through that and seeing how it still correlates to what we see currently in our market. And if it's still good, they drafted a bill in response to that. A bipartisan housing package aimed at boosting supply and improving affordability moved forward this week as the House Financial Services Committee advanced the Housing for the 21st Century Act. That's the PDF there you can download. During a markup, with committee approval secured, the legislation could move toward consideration by the full House. The legislation, which passed in the markup by a vote of 50-1, was unveiled following a recent housing hearing by House Financial Service Committee Chairman French Hill, Republican Arkansas, Ranking Member Maxine Waters, Democrat California, and Housing and Insurance Subcommittee Chair Mike Floyd, Republican Nebraska, and Subcommittee Ranking Member Emmanuel Cleaver, Democrat Missouri. The National Association of Realtors is supporting the bill, which focuses on modernizing outdated housing programs, reducing regulatory barriers, and increasing flexibility for local communities. Can I just say one thing real quick? Like, I just appreciate when government, even though they disagree on so many things, Republicans and Democrats clash, it is a good thing when you see democracy work and bills are being passed that is bipartisan. I think it's a very healthy thing. I mean, we had Republicans involved in this, we have Democrats involved in this. Both parties realize that there is a housing issue, and they're setting aside any differences they might have and making responses to what do we do to fix it. So for that, I say thank you for listening to the National Association of Realtors. Has probably been lobbying for this, as well as the everyday consumer that is suffering because of certain outdated policies that do need to be revisited. So thank you. Addressing the housing supply shortage. So that's one of the things it tries to do. I'm not going to labor on this, but I'm going to talk more on that in here in just a second. And then NAR priorities and next steps. NAR has long supported policies that expand housing supply, protect property rights, and improve affordability for buyers and renters. Real estate professionals see firsthand. We are the ones that are seeing this. So here's the quote. Quote, the National Association of Realtors strongly supports the Bipartisan Housing for the 21st Century Act. This legislation reflects many of the reforms NAR has long advocated for to address America's housing supply and affordability crisis. Modernizing outdated federal housing programs, reducing unnecessary regulatory and permitting barriers, encouraging innovation in construction methods and housing types such as manufactured and modular homes, and expanding flexible financing options to help communities build more homes faster. End quote, says Shannon McGaughan, NAR Executive Vice President and Chief Advocacy Officer. So that is a summary about what this thing goes through. Let's jump, and this is what the bill looks like. Guys, I will not torture you whatsoever, but if you can see, look at the pages of this thing. This is typical bill writing right here at its finest, right? So obviously, I am not going to sit here and read all of this pages to you. Nobody would ever want to watch this, but look at this. Look how long. Who has time to write? Whew, craziness. All right. But let me just kind of go through brief highlights that I've pulled out of this that I think is probably more the ones that we're going to see more effects from if this bill passes, right? What I ultimately see here is this bill is aiming to reduce a lot of those regulatory type barriers, and really comes down to like those overly burdensome like land use policies. So like think of like zoning rules and regulations inside of cities and municipalities that make it really hard to build new homes. So there's a lot of information inside in regards to that in this bill. There's a section in here that talks about encouraging what's called encouraging new designs. And what it's called pre-reviewed designs. So essentially, it's like a pattern books of construction plans that will help local governments speed up the building approvals. So if you have a structure of what this building's going to look like, doesn't mean the facade and all that, but what it means is like the footprint and the foundations and the infrastructure and what that looks like. That if you fall within the scope of that pre-reviewed design, if you build a property in that pre-reviewed design, then there's a more direct way in local governments to speed that building approval process up. So that's what they're addressing in that clause. Then there's also what's called a single-stair building referenced in here. So let's break that down just a second. It's basically instructing HUD to create a model of codes, and what they're calling is point access block buildings. Point access, in other words, a point access that is a block building up to 5 stories that has one internal stairway. All right. So instead of having this major code where you have to have multiple ingress and egress, it has solidified this down to where now there's an approval where you can have one single internal stairway, which that can significantly lower the construction cost to build housing. So it doesn't, you read this, you're like, what does that have to do with anything? Well, you're talking about millions of dollars when you're trying to build a 5-story building, and you got to put multiple access in for each side and access. So now it sounds like, well, this is a fire hazard. This seems dangerous. Now you're going back now to that pre-reviewed designs, right? So they're going through and looking at this, and what is the egress in this property that makes it work to have that single stairway. So there's going to be parameters in place. But again, that pre-reviewed design falls into this 5-story up to 5 stories with a single internal stairway. So those designs are going to help speed up the process to build. Then there's also inside of this is some modernization of the programs that a lot of us have already kind of known, and they're just kind of revisiting them. So like one is the home program reform which updates what was titled home investment partnership program or something along those lines. And what it's going to address is what's called infill housing. Infill housing. It's basically building on a really small vacant city parcel. So, think about like in a big city where they might have tore down a building, but because of code and regulation, that lot is too small to then put another building up or put a residential property in, right? So these rules and regulations kept people from being able to basically build and develop on those smaller parcels. So this now will help increase home ownership value. This will help increase, the ability for them to construct home ownerships, and as well as they've raised what the median price of the value would be. They're allowed to go up to 110% of value. So in other words, they can get approved for something that's worth a whole lot more. So interesting policies kind of happen there. There's also been a slight change to the rural housing loans, where it's going to be doubling the maximum loan amount for rural housing services. So that will also correlate to they need better technology and speed and application to be able to process rural housing. So they're increasing that loan amount, which then means more rural housing type loans. Now, how much, what does that look like? It doesn't really say. It has to go to review and go through all that process, but that's in the bill as far as a talking point. The other interesting thing that I pulled out is manufactured homes. In our industry, it's been very, very difficult a lot of times to get a mobile home or a manufactured home financed because there's chassis and it's more of a trailer, right? And regulations and the way those are constructed required certain criteria when they left the factory. So in this bill, there's a section in there where it's going to allow manufactured homes to be built with or without a permanent chassis, which then makes them possibly more comparable to what would be considered a traditional house, which would help for financing and insurance purposes. So it could be placed on a permanent foundation. So they're removing some of the regulation on these manufactured homes to allow them to do certain things with those that they've not been allowed to do before. So again, could be a really good thing to, again, increase home ownership and housing, right? So you kind of see what they're trying to do here. They're nothing really crazy, but these small little changes could really add up to doing something very significant in the housing market. And this, to me, is why we're paying attention to this, because if this goes through, I do think that there's going to be a lot more talk going into 2026 in regards to housing. And I think we could see a big uptick here. Now, the next section here is actually helping families and borrowers. They've got sections in here that address that. One is veteran support. They're talking about how there has been certain situations where some veterans were excluded from being able to get benefits and programs. So what they've done is they've went in and they've looked at the income calculations when determining eligibility, and they begin to adapt those. So for certain housing assistance programs, what they're focused on is ensuring that disabled veterans aren't penalized for their benefits because they don't fit certain metrics. So they're looking at those metrics and they're beginning to adjust those. And then therefore more veterans will qualify for more benefits through this program. So again, very good. Then there's another section in here, again, going back to like borrowers and families that they're addressing, is what they're calling small dollar mortgages. So it's a proposed pilot program that's going to increase the access to mortgages for homes that are $100,000 or less. So if it's a home that's on the market for $100,000 or less, there might be some programs coming out that makes it easier for people to buy those lower priced homes. So there's some verbiage in there talking about that smaller dollar mortgage of $100,000 or less in there. How does that correlate? I don't know. Something to kind of pay attention to, because if you're an agent out there, this is why you really want to pay attention. You want to read that and say, man, is there an opportunity here in my market? Is there a lot of $100,000 or less homes that we have? Now, those are hard to find, not going to lie, especially with all the inflation. But maybe you're in a market where there is. Pay attention, because there sounds like there could be a program here or some options for them. There is another thing in here in regards to an eviction helpline by HUD. And it's basically requiring HUD to set up a national helpline to provide counseling and resources for renters facing eviction. Now, it's not that HUD can step in and do much with this, but what they are trying to do is reduce the amount of homelessness that's going on in America right now across the country, and it's prevalent, right? So by doing this, the goal is to have some consultations with people that are getting ready to be evicted and figure out what the problem is and what's going on, and try to help them not be evicted. How does that correlate? I don't know. What kind of pressure, undue pressure, does that put on the landlord? I don't know, right? It doesn't say. This needs to be probably investigated, because is HUD going to have the ability to come in and negotiate, or do they have programs that they're going to be able to help with this eviction process? What does this look like? I don't know. But I do know that there's verbiage in there talking about them having to have a helpline to help people that are in the process of getting and facing eviction. Then there is another one in here. It's called temperature sensors and things. It's called a 3-year pilot program that would basically install temperature sensors in federally assisted housing. So basically it's to ensure that the heat and the sources of heat is within the legal temperature requirements. So they've got a clause in there where that's required. And now the key is it's in federally assisted housing, right? So it's not in every housing, but it is something that's federal. So just keep that in mind. There's also some increased oversight taking place here. And this is where accountability comes in. And I think this is a good move. They're putting a little bit of accountability onto HUD to do certain things. So there's a public accountability clause or a regulation inside of here. It's basically the HUD secretary and other housing officials would basically be required to testify annually before Congress regarding the state of homelessness and the physical conditions of public housing. So they have to go in and face Congress and talk about what's going on. So more dialogue, more accountability with HUD can't be a bad thing, right? Then there's also what's called public housing contracts, and local housing agencies would have to publicly disclose all contracts and vendor information on their websites to prevent waste and fraud. So that's kind of, that's my pull out of this kind of information. So we've got like rural housing changes, we've got HUD changes, middle income workforce, we got HUD, VA, eligibility. small dollar mortgages, building size, which is like point of access. We got projective units of streamlining that process. We've got more grants coming out, public housing help. So there's a lot inside of this bill. So it'd be interesting to see how all this plays out. Again, we can do a whole lot of speculation, but I don't think that's what we need to get into. I think we just need to be more alert and listen and just kind of be in tune with where this might be going. All right, very good. Let's now jump into some lighthearted conversations before we wrap up. This is going to be very specific in helping real estate agents directly. This is basically my goal here is to help you guys win listings. But the way you do that is by playing the long game. So that's what this article is about. We talked about this just yesterday. So let's go into this article real quick, and then I'll give you some actionable takeaways that I have for you. So winning the listings long game. This is on Florida Realtors. So well done, guys. And this is News and Media, December 18th. And it says, as markets normalize, agents can win more listings by leaning on local data, clearer pricing expectations, and 90-day plans that build steady pipeline activity. If you were here yesterday and you watched my live stream, I talked about this, is you win by cutting through all the noise of what the feelings are. Vibe session. I said that yesterday, vibe session. There's a feeling that comes along with the real estate market. How do you win the long listing game? It's cutting through that noise of that feelings. And what this article is going to talk about is addressing data, focusing in on the truth of the data, and then relaying that to the consumer to help you price properties effectively. And that's not necessarily a quick win. Sometimes it's the long play, right? So let's get right back into it. As the market shifts and normalizes, agents should move away from quick hit, turn, and burn tactics and lean into a longer term listing strategy built on data, qualifying, and relationships, broker owner Marjorie Adams said in Inman. This starts with having a firm grasp of key local market numbers. Okay, I would say this is 100% true. So here's the numbers that she says to pay attention to, right? So what does she say? Including inventory levels, pricing trends, days on the market, price range, and list to sell ratios, explaining what those figures mean for today's buyers and sellers. Each one of you guys are agents that have access to data and MLSs. You can pull these numbers. Those numbers tell you the true story about what's going on in your market. Learn them well, understand them well, be a student of those numbers, and then figure out how to articulate those to your clients. That's how you win listings. Messaging and listing presentations should match current conditions with clear talking points on what is selling quickly, how payments and rates affect affordability, and how staging, video, and lifestyle marketing help homes stand out. Agents should set expectations around pricing and potential adjustments within about 2 weeks or 10 showings. There's a framework there that she just stated, right? That agents should set expectations around pricing and potential adjustments within about 2 weeks or 10 showings. So what is she saying there? We talked about this again yesterday in the live stream, is you are setting the expectation. Sometimes you might have to take a slightly overpriced property. Sometimes you take a property that doesn't get any showings because you thought it was priced right. Having this conversation up front with the seller and preparing them for price reductions based on certain metrics that don't happen. And what she's saying is, hey, maybe it's 2 weeks or 10 showings. If you have 2 weeks in, which is the most active time for a new listing, if you're 2 weeks in and not much has happened, what's your game plan? What kind of conversation did you have with the seller before that prepared you for that price reduction? Because ultimately that's what we can control. Now we can do certain repairs. Maybe there's something like that they can do to spruce up the home, to get more attraction, curb appeal, but still price is the biggest factor here, or 10 showings. So she gives you some parameters there. I like that. Great plan, great idea. And then she goes on and she says a 90-day listing plan is recommended rather than the short list to close windows of earlier markets. Current listings should also be used to spark new business through social media, database, emails, and open houses. So what she's saying here in this 90-day listing plan is she's not saying list the home for 90 days. But what she is saying is the average the days on the market is between 60 and 100 days, right? So we're not looking at a marketing plan for 30, maybe 10 or 15 or 30 days. We're looking and we're playing the long game. Our strategy now, if you're going into having a listing appointment, should not be I'm selling this tomorrow. It should be, hey, we got to kind of adjust the market, figure out the market, and that comes with a plan. And I've got a plan for you. And I'm gonna lay out, I'm gonna list your home for XYZ a month, but in that months, however that is, I'm gonna do a 90-day marketing strategy for you. And here's what it looks like. So she's saying, like, you have a plan for the first 90 days, right? I think it's a great idea. Additional guidance includes working closely with a small circle of VIP referral partners, increasing live conversations with past customers and prospects, and showing up in the community through events, Q&As, and customer gatherings. These steps support visibility, trust, and steady listing activity even as the market slows. Everything she just said there, we've said all week long when it comes to giving you guys advice on how to grow your business. Is notice that most of this stuff right here is not about spending money. Notice what she's addressing. She's addressing getting in front of people, building relationships. That's what she's talking about. So guidance in community events, Q&As with customers, maybe doing video like this, right? These steps support you getting visible out there, right? That's the game. That's the game. All right, take it one step at a time until you have worked all these elements into your overall workflow. I'm sorry, I keep saying, I thought it was a lady. Wasn't it a lady? Maybe. So my bad if it's a guy. Take it one step. Okay, but you will have invested time and energy into building a strong pipeline for the future. So it is a process. Anytime you start thinking through instigating new systems and processes into your business, don't try to just overhaul everything at once. You're going to get overwhelmed. But if you can take certain elements of this and begin to structure around that, I think that's where you're going to play the long game and win. It's those small micro changes, not just overhauling everything, that help you adjust and get really good at those micro changes so you're adapting over time. So let's just quickly summarize this, right? So we do know that the market has shifted away from that typical turn and burn sales. In other words, I got the listing, I turn around and I burn that property, I sell it, right? You're really settling in more to that long-term play. So the strategy here was a 90-day listing plan and lean heavily into the localized data. So what I would say, I like the idea here. Implementing maybe you tell the seller when you're going for your listing appointment, look, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's a strategy. I'm going to give it the first 10 showings. If we don't have an offer in the first 10 showings, we need to go back and revisit what we need to do to get this property sold. Would you agree? And then if they're going to say yes, then the question would be, is there something they can do to the house, or do we need to be more aggressive on the pricing? But if you have that expectation up front with them, they're not going to be shocked when you come back after 10 showings and say, remember our conversation? I told you that after 10 showings, we're going to have this conversation. People aren't making us an offer. There's got to be a reason why. So you've already set the stage for a returning call to be able to address something you've already set the expectation for, that they knew was coming. So then going back to the data, what I've noticed is a 2 to 5% price adjustment is really a non-negotiable at that point. That's really where you need to lean into. They need to have a reduction, right? And then I would say, lean into some of the data as far as your listing presentation when it goes to showing sold homes. And here's the data I want you to really, really focus in on, because this is the key metric. The key metric is the home list to sell ratio. List to sell ratio. So you list a home at $100,000, just as an example, and the listing sell to ratio is 94%. That home sold for 6% under what it was listed at, right? That's the easy math. You can go to the MLS and pull the list to sell ratio percentage and find out what that number is. You now know, based on the property that is a competing property that's in your market, that's selling and what it sold for. So you can go to your sellers and say, look, we can list your home at this. Here's what the competitors are. And just so you know, we're already looking at a 6% reduction up on the negotiation side. So if we can be more competitive than our competition, then we're going to be more poised to be the one that they buy. So that's the conversation. That list to sell ratio, do not negate that number. I think it's a very, very, very good one. All right. Very good. Last article, we're going to wrap up, guys. In this one, this is just a really easy conversation. This one here is by the Spruce, Make Your Best Home. The title is "We asked real estate pros for the best upgrades that add major value, and they chose these four." Um, doesn't mean that these are by far, this is law, this is the standards of what you should focus on. But it is something to pay attention to, and then just kind of assess your market. Is this what you're seeing? Do you see these type of things happening in your market? If so, then good advice, right? So let's see what these four items were. Go down here. Kitchen update. Hans Ingram, a real estate expert at partner at JSM Project Management, says kitchen renovations are a consistent high ROI, return on investment, home upgrade, but with one major caveat. Quote, over customization kills your returns. Buyers want quality appliances, solid countertops, and functional layouts, but that $15,000 custom range you've been eyeing, it's not going to move the needle when you sell, end quote. So the point there is you can overbuy, right? And can I just, to be honest, and this, more people rely on how they feel when they enter a home. So sometimes it can just look really clean and look updated and be nice and not be the highest quality of the material. I'm not saying be cheap, but I am saying that there is a fine line. Is making it look, together, put together, and nice is a sellable product next to that statement where you're making everything high end, right? So it's balancing that too. To potentially increase your returns during a kitchen renovation, Thomas Borcherding, owner and lead designer at Homestar Design Remodel, suggests reaching out to a local cabinetry dealer as it could lead to discounts of up to 50% off MSRP. Additionally, he notes that many of these companies offer free in-house design services, which can further reduce your overall cost. So there's a little bit of advice if you're looking to renovate. Bathroom update. Ingram notes that bathroom updates deliver similar returns to kitchen renovations, averaging around 60 to 70% return on investment. So that's good. People love a clean bathroom, right? Quote, buyers notice outdated bathrooms immediately. And frankly, for many, it's a deal breaker that affects their entire offer. Modern fixtures, better lighting, and neutral tile choices make a huge difference without breaking the bank, end quote. So again, it's making that bathroom nice. These are areas where people get, to be honest, the most vulnerable in, right? They don't want to go into a nasty place. They want a nice, clean place to go into. So that makes sense to me. You can put money into these things. That makes sense. All right. Next one is curb appeal enhancements. While many homeowners are focused on upgrades that enhance the livability of their homes, interiors, Ingram says people are often surprised by how much curb appeal matters. Quote, a new garage door can return 90 to 95% of its cost, one of the highest ROI improvements you can make, he offers, end quote. In addition, he recommends fresh landscaping and updated front doors that create a crucial positive first impression that colors everything a buyer sees afterward. So again, yeah, he's making a very good point here. You are setting the stage for how the buyer is going to feel the moment they pull up to that property. And that emotion can carry them throughout the whole viewing. So advising your seller is like, hey, you're inside, awesome. Outside needs some work. So when you start talking about like a garage door, you've seen the garage doors, right? They have the lights, they have a few different features on them, maybe some handles, even though they're not doors open this way, but that's how they go up. There's a look there that adds to the house, and there's a perception there of nice going on, right? These people took care of their home. So that's the point that he's making here. All right, energy efficiency upgrades. In a world where utility prices are increasing year over year, energy conscious home buyers are more concerned than ever about the energy efficiency of their potential home purchase. This makes energy efficiency upgrades a great selling point. New windows, quote, new windows, better insulation, and modern HVAC systems used to be afterthoughts, but now they're becoming expected features. People care about their utility bills, end quote. Yeah, like your heat and air pumps, energy efficiency of water heaters, those type of things are all factors that affect that do add value to your home. Solar panels, all those type of things, generators hooked up to the house, the main electrical grid, those type of stuff. Those are all great energy efficiencies. Definitely worth the time checking into. All right, he goes on here now and says the worst ROI home grade. So he gave you 4 really good ideas as far as renovations are concerned that he would say, hey, check these out. These are good returns of investment. Now he's going to give you some of the worst ROI home upgrades. While the upgrades above may lead to hefty returns, these are the home upgrades you should skip if you're looking to get the most return on your investment. Number one, pool installation. Ingram says that pools rarely pay off in most markets. It's true, that is a divided market. People either love them or they hate them. It's not the middle of the road. They either want them or they don't want them. So you are, by having a pool, you are putting a segmentation right straight into the deal, out the gate, right? So some people see it as a liability, some people see it as an asset. So agreed. Luxury remodels. Just like pools, luxury overhauls of any sort rarely return much of the investment. Any improvement that makes your home significantly nicer than the neighborhood average usually underperforms. This is, you never want to be the most expensive home in your neighborhood ever. It's hard to justify the price because people are always going to have the assumption that if I did it, I wouldn't have done it as expensive. Why would I pay for their expensive taste, right? That is literally the concept. And then if I pay that price and I'm the most expensive house in the subdivision, how do I sell it if I need out? So there's so many negatives by doing that. And to be honest, people really don't want the massive amount of luxuries for the majority of homes. There are cases, but they would rather buy, if they're going to spend luxury, they want to get their luxury that fits their standard, that nice tile, that nice fixture, that nice, countertops. They want it to look the way they want it to look. So more than likely, they want to put the luxury stuff in there if they're going to do it at all. So if you're thinking about resale, I would agree. That's not a big game. Sunrooms. Sure, sunrooms are beautiful. However, they're costly to maintain. Most of them are energy hogs and they simply don't appeal to your average buyer. That's true. I've noticed this in homes galore. People have added on sunrooms and they're just a hodgepodge of stuff. Nobody knows how to use that space. And then it's seasonal. So depending on where you are in the country, it's a seasonal room. All these windows, and you got to heat and cool it, or do you not? Do you just have screens? Like, it's a constant back and forth that just complicates the situation. So if you're thinking about adding additional square feet, the argument is that sunrooms, probably dollar for dollar, is not the best investment as far as resale goes. But then there's use cases, right? Maybe you want that. It's up to you. We're talking about resale, return on investment. Wallpaper. Wallpaper has been having a design moment for several years now, and for good reason. It can really beautify an interior if done well. However, patterns come and go quickly, and they rarely appeal to buyers who largely view wallpaper as something they'll have to remove. So that 100%, right? Yeah, again, if you're going to stay in your home, wallpaper is one of those things that appeal to you as the buyer, as the owner. I've heard this statement many times. People have said, well, if I had this big elaborate deck on the back of my house, right, is that going to increase the value of my home? And in some places, maybe. But in reality, my response would be simply, let me ask you a question. Do you enjoy your deck? And they're going to say, well, yeah, I love my deck. It's got all this space and all this stuff. It's like, okay, do you host parties? Yeah, I love hosting parties. Then you got your value because that's why you built it. You built it specifically for you. And that's my point with what he's making and everybody else is like wallpaper, high-end luxury items, all those type of things. They are for you. That is not, we're not talking about ROI, return on investment. You're not talking about a flip. You're not talking about, resale ability. You're talking about your enjoyment. And that's the differentiation. Same with the pools. Do you enjoy your pool? Great. You got your value, right? Like, that's the argument. There's exceptions, but overall, if you want the broadest buyer pool, this is the conversation you need to be having. All right, just really quick takeaways right here. Prioritize the garage door. I like that statement right there because it's a very simple replacement that can fluff up the outside and the curb appeal. And according to him, it has a single highest ROI for exterior improvement next to landscaping. So if you go to a property and it's just a bland door, maybe that's a conversation piece. I would say minor kitchen refreshes. If you're asked the question, should I remodel my kitchen? I think the response should be against a full gut renovation and focus more on like the hardware, the lighting, the faucets, the things that spruce that space up that makes it ready to sell, and not worry about high-end appliances and luxury finishes. Maybe you do need to replace your appliances. New would be nice because of warranties and they look nice, but it doesn't mean you need to go super expensive. The next place is where you talked about energy efficiency and the luxury of that and the ROI of that. buyers are beginning to talk more and more about utility bills, wanting to see those things up front. Pay attention that if the windows are outdated, do they need to be updated? What about the attic insulation? Do they need to do that? What's the utility bills look like of the property you're getting ready to go list or the property you're getting ready to show? If you're representing the buyer, ask for all those things for your buyer so they're aware about what the cost is of this home. You might discover that it's super expensive for them to buy this house as far as utilities go, but you also might find out that it's actually got some energy efficiencies that the listing agent missed. So do your due diligence. And then just advise anybody that's asking you questions about what they need to remodel about over personalization. Warn the sellers that anything that is highly customized that fits their taste, any kind of upgrades like that, like sunrooms or home theaters or wallpaper and all those type of things, pools, rarely recoup the cost, and they could even limit that buyer pool. So make sure you understand how these things correlate to ROI. It's very, very, very crucial, right? All right, very good. Quick rundown of this past week, and then we will wrap up. I want to give you just a bulleted list of things that we have discussed to kind of summarize this week. And I've divided up into a couple little pillars here, if you will, right? So we're going to run through these real quick. So pillar one, I would say this: the new era, market strategy, right? What is the market strategy on getting properties sold? We do know, we talked about this, the market is shifting from a sprint, quick flip, bidding wars, all that kind of stuff is gone. We talked about it being a marathon, a slow, steady growth. Agents who are going to succeed will be those who manage expectations with data rather than hype and the vibe session stuff that we see going on. So what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about affordability versus income, not crashes. So we see a gap beginning to take place. Explain to buyers that homes aren't getting cheap through price drops, but through rising wages and stabilization rates. The 6% is the new 4%. That is the talk track. Explaining to them that that's not going anywhere. We're going to hover right around the 6%. Now we're going to talk about the vibe session, the antidote. What is the antidote to the vibe session? In other words, the feeling of what is going on in a recession, if you will, or in this landscape that we have. I want you to use local data, employment, wage data. What is the average days on the market? What is actually going on in your market? Counter the negative consumer sentiment that the media is portraying when the vibe is bad, but the data is good. You win by being the voice of reason in this environment. Be the voice of reason. Then I'm going to talk about inventory forecasting. What does 2026 look like? What's going to happen? We talked about the building sentiment low, but we talked about building. There's a future expectation that is high in 2026 that will likely see a surge in inventory. So what I would say is go back, prepare your warm leads now, help them to get financing, talk through them, have buyer consultations with them, and get them ready when options begin to increase. Be ready for that pivot. Pillar two, we talked about tactical listing and pricing power. As the listings are rising, your ability to keep a seller committed to a property fresh is the difference between a commission and a completely lost lead. You'll lose it if you do not understand the makeup that we are in and how to address it. So I love what we just talked about today, the 10 showing rule. Set a non-negotiable contract with sellers. If you hit 10 showings or 14 days without an offer, I would say a 2 to 5% price adjustment happens immediately. The moment that does not happen, you're not selling the property now. You're beyond that window. You need to position it, be ready to sell, have that conversation, that expectation at the very beginning. The next thing is value discovery of the property. All right. In other words, if that property is not selling, drop the price, reposition the asset. Can it be sold as an investor portfolio or a redevelopment opportunity? Is there something else? Is another use case for the properties that are just sitting? Then I would lean into offering good advice in regards to high ROI. Guide sellers toward the walk-in showers, which we talked about earlier this week, and then a new garage door, which we just talked about. The 90% ROI as far as curb appeal goes. Discourage any kind of over-personalization like sunrooms or home theaters or anything like that set people apart, that basically puts them outside of the market. Pillar number 3 is tech and digital independence. We talked about a lot about tech and digital independence, right? So the big players, we talked about Google, Netflix, OpenAI are changing how clients find you, right? Mainly Google entering into the real estate portal world, possibly, right? And how Zillow maybe was affected by that possibility, right? We talked about that. So we had Google versus the portals? Is Google's testing of direct home listings on their site, is it going to optimize the way Google does business? And then how that correlates to your business profile on Google, and how you need to be adding your reviews to that and fluffing that up if Google does make a move to be a big player in the real estate arena. Right? Then we talked about owning your own content. Content is king, how YouTube can become the hub for your voice. So move your center of gravity away from social media as a whole and onto your own email list and websites and YouTube, and then have those type of things syndicate out. Then we talked about AI for local authority. Use AI to generate hyper local marketing insights and question of the week type videos. Focus on, remember we talked about the 5 C's, but we're looking for really consistency over just production quality or quantity. A helpful phone, video, something like that is just like the perfect thing to be able to stay in front of your consumers. And then number 4, we just did this. We talked about multiple times even this week, legislative and regulatory type shifts. We talked about Washington is moving to cut red tape in regards to this new bill. NAR is restructuring inside of what they did in 2025. And what we want to focus with you guys is staying compliant and informed on new builds is your competitive edge. Understand about what is going on in your industry and be able to apply that and find the opportunity inside of all these changes. So we went over the first 21st Century Housing Act, how that bill pushes for pattern books and pre-approved designs and ADUs, educate investors on how these streamlined rules begin to make small scale developments more profitable. We talked about small dollar mortgages as a possibility. Watch for the new pilot program for mortgages under $100,000 that should be coming out. This will open up a massive door for first-time buyers in lower price markets. So there's an opportunity there. And then we talked just about being, aware of antitrust awareness with federal scrutiny on large brokerage and mergers. Be a little wary of relying solely on exclusive or private listing networks that may, face future bans. Not saying don't do it, but understand why you're doing it. Like, make sure you have a strategy and a reason to do that, not to violate any of the anti-fair housing things that technically we were kind of being accused of, right? Very good. There's a summary of the entire week. I hope you guys got something of value. If you did, smash that subscribe button, the follow button, ring the bell. I appreciate you guys for being here. I want you guys to have an amazing week. We are heading straight into Christmas next week. It's wild. So I'll have 2 streams next week, and then I'll be off for a while for Christmas break. So thank you guys for being here. I appreciate you guys greatly. I hope you got something of value here. We will see you guys next week. Have an amazing weekend. Take care.